I never thought the day would come when my only son would say to me, "You won't live that much longer anyway." That sentence was like a blade slicing through my throat, cold and sharp, and I could almost taste blood in my mouth. The small room in my house suddenly felt suffocating, as if every brick were pressing against my heart. Raphael, the boy I once cradled in my arms on that rainy night, now stood before me, his face as expressionless as stone. "I just want you to transfer that money so I can invest it. Once it makes a profit, you'll still benefit from it," he said coolly, his eyes gleaming with ambition. I looked at the oak table, the one where he had written his first words. I still remembered the crooked letters when he first wrote "Mom." Now that word "Mom" had turned into a kind of debt in his eyes, hadn't it? "No, Raphael. That's what's left of my life," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, though my hands were trembling, my fingernails digging into my palms until they bled. Raphael let out a mocking laugh. "The rest of your life? How long do you think that is? A few years? 10. I could see it clearly in his eyes, not a trace of pity. Only annoyance that the one holding the money dared to refuse him. He slammed his phone on the table. The sharp sound made me flinch. I stepped back, my back hitting the wall. In that moment, I suddenly remembered the first night after my husband died. Raphael was only 12, curled up under a blanket, and I held him, whispering, "I won't let you go without anything." I kept that promise. Right up to this moment, when that very promise had become the rope tightening around my neck. "You don't understand," I tried to speak, but my voice was hoarse, stuck in my throat. "I just want some peace. My whole life I've run, strained, and endured enough. I bought this house not for myself, but so you could have a place to call home, so you and Lucy wouldn't be adrift. Now I just need a small corner, a place to breathe, to live out the rest of my days quietly." Raphael turned away, his shoulders stiff. "You talk as if you're the victim. But everything you have is thanks to me putting up with living here all these years. I just asked you to help once, just once, and you're being stingy. Or are you afraid of losing your pitiful act? Stingy?" I pressed my lips together, the feeling rising in my throat. "That's my flesh and blood, every drop of sweat, every callus I earned at the horse stable. Every coin I squeezed from pain, humiliation, and endurance." He stepped closer, the smell of cigarettes and alcohol swirling around him, thick as the anger in his eyes. "Your flesh and blood. So what?" His voice cracked, shaking between rage and despair. "Don't you see that I'm your flesh and blood too?" I looked straight into his eyes, my voice low but hard as steel. "That's exactly why, it hurts." At that moment, something inside me broke. I could hear my heart beating wildly, as if it wanted to escape my chest. I realized the son I gave birth to had long disappeared. What stood before me now was a stranger, calculating, numb, cold. He turned, picked up his phone, and said flatly, "If you don't transfer the money, then deal with the consequences. I'm not threatening you, it's just that in this world, everything has a price. You chose to keep your money, your house, your stability, then be ready to lose something else." The door slammed shut. The sound of the lock turned, then silence. I stood there, smelling the dampness from the wall, listening to the steady ticking of the clock, reminding me that time keeps moving, even when a son plots against his mother. I sat down, my hands trembling on my knees. The house that was once a home now felt cold, foreign. Since Lucy moved in, laughter had faded, replaced by whispered conversations behind closed doors. I had tried to ignore it, to believe my son was happy. But perhaps my silence had only fed his greed. I opened the drawer and took out the savings book. My fingers brushed over the name, Isabella Rivera. Every letter felt like a weary breath. I thought of the windy nights when I wrapped cakes to sell and pay Raphael's school fees. Of the times I skipped meals to buy him soccer shoes. Of his marriage certificate I was the one who signed as witness, and the one who paid for the entire wedding. And now, I had to hear my own son say, "You won't live that much longer anyway." I let out a faint laugh, one so quiet it frightened even me. It had no sound, just a small crack across my hardened face. Perhaps this was the moment when a mother's heart stopped deluding itself. I put the savings book back, locked the drawer, and slipped the key into my pocket. In the silence, I could hear my own breathing, short, broken, like the last gasp of a dying faith. Upstairs, Raphael's voice echoed down, mixed with Lucy's, "If she doesn't give it, we'll find another way." I closed my eyes. Every word stabbed straight into my heart. But when I opened them again, I saw only the dim light of the desk lamp, and a cold stillness spreading through me. No more tears, no more trembling. Only one thought remained clear and sharp as steel. If that's how you treat the one who gave you life, then I'll teach you what it means to lose everything. The next morning in that house began in silence. The clinking of a spoon against a glass was the only sound. Lucy walked around in a thin nightgown, the smell of expensive perfume filling the kitchen. Her smile was polite, but as cold as a mirror. "Did you sleep well, Mother?" she asked every morning, as if greeting a servant. I nodded, saying nothing. The steam from the teapot rose, hiding my eyes. At this age, I've learned that silence is sometimes the only way to keep the last bit of dignity you have. Raphael usually woke up late, coming downstairs with a crumpled face, barely looking at me. Sometimes he snapped when he saw the newspaper I left on the table, "If you've finished reading, clean it up, don't make a mess." That sentence in a house under my own name cut like a knife. I suddenly felt like a tenant in my own home, the place that once held laughter, warm meals, and hope. Now everything felt cruelly unfamiliar. The familiar walls seemed to stare at me with contempt, and the air itself reeked of possession, as if I were the intruder. That night, it rained. The first rain of the season, steady and persistent. I stood by the second-floor window, looking down at the yard where the water was rising over the tiled ground. Lucy had just come out of the bathroom, her hair wet, phone in hand, her voice soft but clear enough for me to hear, "Don't worry. If she doesn't sign, there's still another way. The stair railing is quite rotten, isn't it?" Raphael was silent. Then a faint laugh, like wind slicing through a throat. I turned around, my heart pounding wildly. That sentence was vague like a shadow, but deep inside, I knew I had just heard a threat meant for me. That night, the house was so still it felt as if all its breath had been drained away. I sat in the kitchen, mending an old handkerchief, the needle trembling in the weak light, like the last strand of breath clinging to something already lost. No more tears. Not even sadness. Only a coldness seeping from my heart to my hands. Something inside me had died quietly, without a sound, that afternoon when Raphael stood before me, talking about money and calling me a burden. From that moment on, I understood, one is truly alone when love within them has nowhere left to go. Now, all that remains is the habit of living an existence without emotion. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made me look up. Raphael stood there, his shadow stretching long across the wall. "Still awake?" he asked, his voice dry. I shook my head slightly. He walked past without another word, but his eyes flicked quickly toward the wooden railing. For a brief moment, I saw his fingers lightly touch it gently, as if testing its strength. I said nothing. I just watched him, then lowered my eyes and kept sewing. The stitch went astray, piercing the tip of my finger. Blood welled up, bright red against the white fabric. I looked at that drop of blood and saw myself in it, fragile, weak, but still alive. The next morning, the house was silent. Lucy skipped breakfast. Raphael said he had to meet a client. I stayed behind, cleaning the staircase, wiping the dust off the railing. The wood really was rotten, deep cracks like dry veins. I ran my hand over it, a bad feeling stirring inside me. That evening, when the rain stopped, I went upstairs. The hallway light flickered, casting my warped shadow against the wall. I gripped the railing and took slow steps. The wood was cold and slippery. I had just set my foot on the third step when I heard a faint crack. Just a split second. I fell. Everything spun. The staircase, the light, my reflection in the mirror all blurred into one. My back hit the floor hard, my head struck the edge of a step. A dry sound echoed inside my skull. Then, silence. Hot blood flowed from my temple, seeping into my hair, running down my cheek. I tried to lift my head, but couldn't. From the corner of my eye, I saw a pair of shoes at the top of the stairs. White. Lucy. She stood there, silent, looking down. Her eyes showed no expression, she just tilted her head slightly, then turned away. I closed my eyes. In the darkness, I heard the laughter of a child echoing Raphael as a boy, running around the yard, shouting, "Mom, I won." That memory, for a fleeting moment, brought me warmth. Then it went cold again. When the hallway light went out completely, all I could hear was the sound of rain falling on the porch. Blood trickled from my head, dripping onto the old stone floor. Each drop was a fading breath. I didn't know whether I would live or die. But in that moment, I realized something: silence can kill, but it can also save. If God gives me one more breath, I will use it to uncover everything. When I opened my eyes, I didn't know where I was. Everything blurred through a heavy gray haze. The smell of gas filled my throat, sharp as needles. I tried to sit up, my head spinning, the wound on my temple still bleeding, sticking to the floor. The kitchen in front of me was hazy, the hissing sound of an untended gas burner steady and sinister, like the whisper of a demon. I pressed my hands down, trying to stand, but my foot slipped and my body collapsed onto the cold floor. Every muscle burned with pain, my breath short, my heart pounding wildly. "Raphael," I whispered, but the sound was nothing more than air. I heard nothing but the hiss of gas, growing faster. I knew he had come home. He had forgotten to turn off the valve. I knew that kind of forgetfulness too well, not carelessness, but intention disguised as neglect. I dragged myself toward the stove, my hand touching the icy tiles. Each movement sent waves of pain through me. I reached for the valve, but my head spun, my hands trembling violently. The gas had filled the room, my sense of smell was fading. The whole world seemed drowned in poisonous mist. The window was shut tight. I reached for the latch. It wouldn't budge. It was stuck. I tapped on it, then harder. No response. I coughed violently, each breath choking me. My eyes burned, tears mixing with the gas, hot and stinging. Amid the coughing, I saw myself inside a memory, old dinners coming back as if replayed in slow motion. This kitchen once smelled of fried onions, toasted bread, chicken soup I made when Raphael had a cold. Laughter, the clinking of spoons, his voice calling, "Mom, one more bite." Now, only the smell of poison remained. The smell of betrayal, cruelty, and malice spreading everywhere. I pounded my hand on the window harder, my palm bleeding. Outside, through the foggy glass, I saw a figure. Lucy. She stood there, phone in hand, staring inside. Not a move. Not a flicker of emotion. I gestured, tried to speak, but only raspy sounds came out. "Help me." Lucy tilted her head, the light from her phone reflecting on her face cold and clear like glass. Then she turned away, slowly walking off. I felt my heart being crushed. My breathing broke apart. I dragged myself a little farther, my trembling hand trying to twist the gas knob. It wouldn't move. I had no strength left. My body crumbled like sand. The wall clock struck 6 dry chimes, then stopped. I lifted my head, trying to take one more breath, but the air was nothing but poison now. In front of me, images overlapped, Raphael as a child, sitting in my lap, smiling brightly, Raphael on his wedding day, kissing my hand and saying, "Mom, I'll make you the happiest woman in the world." I laughed. A laugh without sound, just a faint breath escaping my chest. The smoke thickened. Everything tilted. I heard a humming in my ears, like waves crashing endlessly on the same shore. I tried to crawl, my body hitting the cabinet. A picture frame fell, the wooden frame shattered, a photo of Raphael and me at the beach when he was 16. I smiled weakly, my finger touching that face. The light before my eyes faded completely. I saw white specks shimmering, like tiny stars falling. I thought, maybe this is the moment God calls me. I let go, falling onto the cold tile floor, my face pressed against it. The final cough escaped me, caught in my throat. But just when I thought it was over, a sound broke through the wooden door bursting open. Someone rushed in. I couldn't see their face, only heard hurried footsteps, then shouting. Everything dissolved into a blinding white light. I sank into darkness, but deep inside, I knew I was still breathing. Faint, fragile, but alive. I clung to it, like grasping the last thread tying me to the world. In that void between life and death, I heard someone calling my name, distant, but real. Isabella. Hold on. That voice wasn't Raphael's, nor Lucy's. It was Vega, the neighbor who often brought pastries every weekend. A drop of cold water fell on my forehead, then another. I wanted to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt as heavy as stone. My breathing was uneven. Amid that haze, I heard Vega crying, calling for an ambulance, the sound of alarms ringing urgently. I wanted to say that I was still here. That I wasn't dead. That someone had tried to kill me in the very house I built with my cracked hands and exhausted years. But my throat only released a hoarse breath, like the cry of a soul being buried alive. And then, before the darkness swallowed everything, I whispered to myself, if I live through this night, I will never be silent again. When I woke up, the harsh white light stabbed at my eyes. The smell of antiseptic filled the air, cold and sharp. Every sound was distant, distorted, as if echoing through water. A breathing tube was fixed in my throat, my chest rose and fell weakly. A face appeared through the brightness, Vega. He sat by the bed, eyes red, voice trembling. You're alive, Isabella. They said you had only a few minutes left, but I broke the door and pulled you out in time. The whole house was full of smoke. God kept you here. I wanted to say thank you, but the words caught in the tube. Each breath burned in my throat. I only managed to nod slightly, tears spilling down my cheeks. Vega held my hand warm, rough, still smelling faintly of smoke. Rest. Don't be afraid. It's over. But I knew it wasn't over. Nothing ends when the one who caused it still walks free. The door opened. Raphael walked in, shirt crisp, tie perfectly knotted. The light reflected off his face, making everything look shamelessly false. Mother, he said softly, stepping closer to the bed. Vega stood up, nodded, and stepped out, perhaps to give us privacy. When the door closed, the room was filled only with the steady beep of the heart monitor. Raphael sat down beside me, the scent of expensive cologne overpowering the smell of medicine. He lowered his head, placing his hand over mine, the same hand that had once been so small in mine when he was learning to walk. Now it was cold and heavy as stone. You worried me, he said quietly, his voice low, tender enough to make my skin crawl. The accident, so unexpected. I came home and heard Vega say the house was full of gas and smoke everywhere. I looked at him through the breathing tube, saying nothing. He avoided my eyes and gave a faint smile. Good thing Vega came in time. God still loves you, maybe he's not ready to take you yet. He paused, leaned closer. His breath brushed my cheek, warm, laced with alcohol. But, maybe God just wants you to rest now, doesn't he? I tried to move, but my arm was heavy as stone, shifting only slightly. He held my hand gently, softly, like a devoted son soothing his mother. But in that touch, I felt cold. Not of the flesh, but of the soul. His eyes didn't look at me, they looked into his own relief, as if my disappearance would finally bring him peace. Raphael reached for the breathing tube. I tried to breathe harder, making a hoarse sound, but he gently pulled the tube from my throat. It felt like thousands of needles stabbing into my windpipe. The air vanished. I opened my mouth, gasping, but there was only emptiness. My eyes widened, staring at him, the man I gave birth to, killing me with perfect gentleness. He leaned close to my ear, whispering. "I'll take care of all the paperwork soon," he said, his voice deep and soothing, almost like a lullaby. "You just need to rest now, don't worry about anything. I've arranged everything, the house, the accounts, all of it. You can leave peacefully. I'll do well, just as you taught me." He smiled. His gaze was tender, but in its depths I saw only the satisfaction of someone who had achieved what he wanted. I saw his lips move, heard the sound fade into the air, but my mind was already dimming. The heart monitor stuttered, flashes of white light flickering and fading. I reached out, touching his sleeve. He froze, his eyes trembling for just a second, then he gently pried my hand away and laid it back on the bed. The door opened softly. The hallway light spilled in, illuminating half his face. He turned away, straightened his tie, and walked out. The room sank into silence. I heard my heartbeat falter fast at first, then weaker. The monitor beeped once, then stretched into a single flat line. Everything withdrew from me: sound, light, existence. I fell into a freezing void. I don't know how long time passed. In that darkness, I felt myself floating between two worlds. No weight, no pain, no breath. Only memories, dim fragments flaring and fading, Raphael's childlike face, the smell of his wet hair, his tiny hand clutching mine while crossing the street. I heard his voice again, "Mom." And I wanted to answer, but couldn't. Then, somewhere far away, a scream echoed. "Doctor. She has no pulse." Running footsteps. The clatter of instruments. The white light blazed again in my mind. I was being pulled back as if someone had yanked the cord still tethering me to the earth. Someone pressed hard on my chest, steady and firm. A woman's voice shouted, "Charge." I heard a long beep, then a thud. My body jolted violently. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then silence. The doctor shook his head. No response. Time of death. The sound of a pen scratching paper. Raphael's voice from the hallway, "Thank you, doctor. I'll handle the transfer of the body." The door closed. The world grew cold again. I felt nothing, but somewhere far away, deep inside my chest, something persisted, a faint, slow beat. A breath. Very small. My body was wrapped tightly in a white sheet, the chill of the metal autopsy table seeping into my flesh. I couldn't see or hear clearly, except for that faint heartbeat somewhere within me, like a weak knocking between two worlds. Death, or what they believed was death, enveloped me in perfect silence. Outside, I heard distant voices, the rustle of papers, the scratch of pens signing, the click of high heels on tile. Raphael. His voice was calm, chillingly calm. "The death certificate, yes, mark it as acute respiratory failure. I'll sign it. And I'll handle the transfer of ownership right away. By the way, Lucy has also given me authorization." "My condolences," a staff member replied, cold, professional. "No need," Raphael said, his tone dry. "My mother's time to rest has come." Rest. He called killing his mother rest. I wanted to scream, but my throat was hollow. I wanted to move, but every muscle was frozen. I was trapped inside my own body, half alive, half dead, between hell and earth. The door opened. The wheels of a gurney rolled over the tiles. Someone was pushing me. A gust of cold air slipped through the sheet. They took me downstairs to the place reserved for those whose hearts had stopped. No one knew my heart still struggled faintly, beating like a grain of dust. They slid me into the cold chamber. The metal door closed with a harsh clack. Inside was pure darkness, the cold squeezing my chest. I thought I would really die completely, this time. But then, somewhere inside my ribs, my heartbeat grew stronger, resisting like a small flame in a storm. I clung to that life with sheer will, not with breath. I don't know how much time passed. Maybe minutes, maybe hours. Suddenly, there was a noise, a door opening, footsteps stopping, then a woman's startled voice. "Wait, check the monitor again. Why is that light flashing?" A faint beam of light slipped through the crack of the door. Someone opened the cold chamber, and a gasp followed. "Oh God, the heartbeat. She still has a heartbeat." Everything after that was chaos, voices shouting for emergency response, machines powering on, the hurried rolling of wheels on the floor. The cold faded, replaced by the warm glare of medical lights. They pulled me out from the sheet, my breathing returning in ragged gasps, sharp like needles piercing my lungs. "She's breathing on her own," a nurse cried, her voice trembling. "Quick, alert the doctor. Record the time of revival." My body shook violently. I tried to open my eyes. The white light was blinding, figures moving around me. I couldn't speak, but I felt every heartbeat pounding in my chest, strong, fierce, no longer weak. I had survived. Once more. At that same moment, a few blocks away, in the house where I had been left to die, Raphael and Lucy were raising their glasses of wine. The candle between them flickered, the red wine swirling like blood. "We did it," Lucy said softly, her eyes drifting to the wedding photo on the wall. "Everything is ours now." Raphael smiled, his voice light. "Yes. Mother will be buried in the city cemetery. Simple. No fuss." "Are you sure about the paperwork?" "Sure," he replied, leaning back in his chair. "Everything's signed. The house, the savings book, even the secondary account. Tomorrow the notary will finalize it. No one can stop us now." Lucy lifted her glass slightly. "A toast to peace." Two glasses clinked, a cold, hollow sound. Just then, Vega's phone vibrated. He looked at the screen, surprised. "St. Gabriel Hospital." He answered quickly, his voice urgent. "Hello." From the other end came the hurried voice of a nurse on duty. "Mr. Vega? We're calling to inform you. Mrs. Isabella Rivera isn't dead. Her body began breathing on its own. Her condition is stabilizing. She's alive." At the hospital, Vega sat in shock outside the recovery room, his hands trembling as he held the phone. He still couldn't say anything beyond shallow breaths. He had just been told that I was alive, the woman he had watched be taken to the place of the dead. Inside the white room, I lay still, my breathing steady. My eyes were closed, but in my mind, everything was clear as light piercing through a veil of darkness. I knew what Raphael had done. I knew he had wanted me dead. And now, he would have to face the woman he had buried alive. Between two worlds, I had been chosen. I did not die. I was returned not to forgive, but to end it all. I woke in a blaze of white light, the hospital lamps reflecting off the ceiling like a mirror showing every fragile breath I took. There was no smell of gas, no blood, only the sterile chill of 4 lines and the steady rhythm of the heart monitor like a hymn of life returning. My chest ached with every deep breath. A trembling hand reached for my neck, a thin, long scar where the breathing tube had once been pulled out by the very hands of the son I had borne. The skin was rough, cold, hard like the lingering touch of death etched into my body. I didn't cry. I just stared at the ceiling. The lights above shimmered faintly, metallic and sterile like Raphael's eyes before he pulled the tube from my throat. I heard Vega's voice outside the door, speaking softly to a nurse. "Don't let anyone in to see her. She needs rest." His voice trembled, but it was firm. Perhaps he understood. And perhaps he was the only one who still believed that this return wasn't a miracle but a second chance. The door closed. I shut my eyes, letting my breath blend with the steady beeping of the monitor. Fractured memories returned, the broken staircase, the heavy gas, Lucy outside the window, Raphael leaning down to whisper, "Leave peacefully, mother." They mixed together, sharp and vivid, but within that pain, something hardened. A cold, sharp awareness, tempered like steel. I whispered, not aloud, but clearly within my mind. If God let me live again, it means I must end this evil. I began to play my part. When the doctors came and asked questions, I only shook my head slightly, my eyes blank, like someone who had lost their mind. I heard them murmuring to each other that there may be neurological damage, memory disorientation after trauma and oxygen deprivation. I stayed silent, letting them believe it. Every word I didn't speak was another brick in the wall I was building to protect myself. Vega quietly helped me. He told me everything: how he saw the smoke, broke the door, pulled me out of the house, and how Raphael arrived afterward, calmly signing the death certificate. When he got to that part, his eyes turned red. I can't forget his face, Isabella. It wasn't grief. It was satisfaction. I took his hand. "Don't tell anyone I woke up," I whispered, my voice hoarse, weak but steady. "Not even Raphael or Lucy. I need them to believe I truly died." Vega nodded. "What are you planning to do?" I looked toward the window. Outside, the sky had turned gray, and fine rain drifted sideways. "Live," I said softly. "Live to prove that the one who killed me will never have peace." In the days that followed, I played the perfect role of a brain-damaged patient. I stared blankly at everyone, didn't respond, didn't remember, didn't react. The nurses pitied me, whispering to one another, "Poor woman, she doesn't know anything anymore." I listened, I remembered, I smiled inside. Vega helped me retrieve my phone and recover the destroyed documents. I asked him to discreetly contact lawyer Thompson, the one who had handled many cases of elder abuse and property theft. I knew Thompson wouldn't ask too many questions. One look at the scar on my neck would be enough. One night, I asked Vega to bring my old laptop, the one I used to manage my savings account. I turned it on, typing slowly, but the data still appeared line by line. The accounts that had been emptied, the transfers to an account named R. Rivera Holdings. Everything looked legal, at least on paper. But I knew how to prove that this legality was built on lies. I searched through every email, every file, every copy of the contracts. Even in exhaustion, I kept typing, eyes burning, neck aching, but my hands didn't stop. When Vega brought me soup, I smiled faintly and whispered, "I'm taking back my breath, one piece of evidence at a time." Late one night, the hospital window was slightly open. The cold wind blew in. Through the mist, I saw headlights by the hospital gate. Raphael. He stood there, talking on the phone, his posture calm. "I've already signed the cremation papers," he said, his voice low but audible through the crack of the door. "We just need the hospital to finalize the file. It'll be done by morning." I smiled faintly. Morning. A simple word, but to me, it meant the chance to turn everything around. The next morning, when Vega came, I whispered, "Get me out of here. Not through the main door. No matter what it takes." He looked at me and shook his head. "It's too dangerous." "Danger is the only thing I'm still alive for," I said, my tone soft but firm. We waited until night. Vega disguised himself as a janitor, pushing a cart of linens with me hidden underneath, covered by a blanket. As we passed through the back gate, I heard the steady rain mixing with my heartbeat, no longer the beat of a weak woman, but of someone who had returned from hell. In the darkness of the small truck, I opened my eyes. Vega drove in silence. Through the fogged window, I saw the city lights fading behind us, the golden glow drifting away like dissolving memories. I whispered, my voice hoarse but filled with meaning. "I didn't die, Vega. I've only just begun to live. We left the hospital in the rain, the wind cutting through the cracks of the truck like cold blades. Wrapped tightly in an old coat, I sat still in the back seat, staring straight ahead. The city slipped by in a blur of dim yellow lights, distorted by the water on the glass. Every building, every street, every place I'd once walked while alive, now had a different hue, cold, distant, silent like a cemetery. Vega drove slowly, avoiding potholes. He said nothing, only glanced at me occasionally through the mirror. Finally, he asked quietly, "Where will you go now, Isabella?" "To my brother's old house, on the outskirts of Helena Valley, Montana. No one knows about it. I need time." We arrived near dawn. The small wooden house stood isolated in a field of grass, surrounded by thick fog. I stepped out, my legs trembling but my mind unnaturally clear. The air here was different, truly quiet, with no machines, no smell of medicine, only damp earth and the whisper of wind through old tiles. Inside the old room, I began piecing together every fragment of memory, every bit of evidence Vega had brought from the hospital, copies of records, transfer certificates, account files. Everything was clean on paper, but I knew how to read between the lines, where lies lived. 3 days later, Vega brought Lawyer Thompson. He froze when he saw me, the woman whose death certificate he had already read. "Mrs. Rivera," Thompson said softly, as if afraid to offend a ghost. "You are still alive." "I escaped death," I answered quietly, looking straight at him. "But God spared me for a reason." Thompson stayed silent for a long while, then nodded slightly. "If you wish, I can help. But we'll need evidence, proof of intentional interference." "I don't have a video," I said evenly. "Only a scar. And a witness." "Witness?" "Mr. Vega," I looked at him. "And if we're lucky, there might be a recording in the hospital." Raphael was in the recovery room when no one was allowed in. The internal camera might have captured it. Thompson nodded. "I'll request access. And I'll need you to write a full statement, from the very beginning." I looked at my hands, thin, trembling, but still strong enough to hold a pen. "I'll write," I said. "Every detail. Every stolen breath." That night, I sat down to write. Under the dim yellow light of an oil lamp, each sentence fell slowly, like drops of coagulated blood. He pulled out the breathing tube. He said, "I'll help you leave in peace." I saw his eyes never blink. I couldn't scream. With every line I wrote, my heart beat harder, not from fear, but from the certainty that I was alive again, not as a fragile mother, but as the witness to her own attempted murder. A week later, Thompson called. His voice was deep but tinged with excitement. "We got the footage. Recovery room camera, frame at 11:47 p.m. clear image. Raphael standing beside your bed. And it shows him pulling the tube." I closed my eyes silently. No tears, only a chill spreading down my spine. "Anything else?" I asked. "Yes." After that, he left. 3 minutes later, the heart monitor went flat. The nurse entered too late. I filed a preliminary charge. The police will issue an investigation warrant within 48 hours. I said nothing more. I just looked out the window, the wildflowers swaying gently in the breeze. The faint morning light fell across the table. On it sat a cup of tea I hadn't yet touched, steam still rising, thin as a soul not yet gone. 2 days later, Raphael received the investigation order. I knew it from Vega. He told me that when the police knocked on the door, Raphael was sitting in his office, a glass of wine in hand, while Lucy was trying on a dress in the bedroom. When the officer finished reading the last line, Raphael turned pale, his fingers gripping the glass so tightly it cracked. "Impossible," he whispered. "She was dead." I imagined his face at that moment, pale, lips colorless, sweat beading on his forehead. The man who had once stood before my lifeless body, signing my death certificate, now had to read an investigation warrant bearing his own name for killing his mother. That night, I sat alone. Vega and Thompson had gone home. The room was silent. The wind from the field slipped through the crack in the door, carrying the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. I lit a candle and placed it before the mirror. In the flickering light, the reflection staring back at me was no longer that of a betrayed woman, but a soul who had rewritten her own death. I spoke softly, almost whispering to myself. He thought his mother was just a memory. Now she has become a nightmare. My phone vibrated. A message from Thompson. Tomorrow you must appear in court to sign the confirmation. The police have agreed to provide witness protection. I read it over and over. Each word gleamed like a sharpened blade. Outside, the rain began to fall. I stood up, walked to the door, and drew a deep breath of the damp, cold air. In that moment, I saw myself clearly: Isabella Rivera, the woman who had died, come back to life, and was now returning to claim justice. No more tears. No more fear. Only silence, the last weapon I would use to the end. The trial opened on a clear June morning, the sunlight so sharp it revealed every dust mote floating in the air. I sat in the front row, a thin scarf around my neck hiding the scar beneath the gray fabric. People looked at me as if a ghost had stepped out of the grave. It made sense on paper: I was dead. And today, I had come to live again before the eyes of justice. Raphael entered with his lawyer. His shirt was pressed, his shoes polished, but sweat gleamed on his forehead. When our eyes met, he froze. For a second, shock flickered into terror. I didn't look away. No anger, no tears, no trembling, only stillness, the kind he had never understood, the kind of silence that kills by forcing one to listen to their own conscience. Lucy sat beside him, clutching her purse, her face ashen. They looked like two people sitting in a pile of ashes, pretending not to smell the smoke. Lawyer Thompson stood, his voice firm, each word resonating through the courtroom. Your Honor, this is a case of attempted murder and deliberate financial fraud against an elderly person. The defendant Raphael Rivera removed the breathing tube from his mother while she was still alive. The hospital's security footage, witness statements, and the testimony of the night nurse will confirm everything. Raphael lowered his head. His hand clenched into a fist, the knuckles white. Thompson gestured. The screen lit up. The footage appeared: the hospital room, bright white light, Raphael standing beside my bed. He looked around, then leaned down. The breathing tube was pulled out. The courtroom fell silent. Someone's breath caught, then dissolved into absolute stillness. Lucy burst into tears. But I knew those weren't tears of remorse, they were fear, the moment she saw her own future collapse. Thompson turned to me. Mrs. Isabella, would you like to say something? I stood. Every eye turned toward me. My heartbeat was steady, slow. My voice hoarse, but clear. I didn't come here for revenge. I came to end this. I paused, looking straight at Raphael. A mother can forgive her child for ignorance, for mistakes, for weakness. But she cannot forgive the one who looked into her eyes while killing her. I don't hate you, Raphael. I simply don't love you anymore. The room was utterly silent. Raphael bowed his head, his lips trembling, then began to cry. But his tears came too late, mingling with sweat and fear. The judge read the verdict, his voice calm, deep, echoing through the hall. The defendant, Raphael Rivera, is sentenced to 25 years in prison for attempted matricide and property fraud. The accomplice, Lucy Fernandez, is sentenced to 12 years. When the gavel struck, I closed my eyes. Not to rejoice, but to say farewell to the part of me that once believed, once loved, once gave everything. After the trial, I didn't stay to face the press. I simply walked outside, where the sunlight felt strangely warm. Vega waited by the door, holding his old straw hat. He smiled kindly. You did it, Isabella. I answered softly, "No. God did. I just listened." We walked across the square. Each step felt lighter, every breath free of the smell of medicine replaced by the scent of young grass. I felt my body real, alive, no longer a corpse in a freezer, no longer a name on a death record. I was living. Months later, I sold all my remaining assets. I never returned to the house where I nearly died. I signed it over to an organization that protects abused elders. From that money, I founded a small fund, named the Second Life. It was for people like me, those erased by their own families. Those who survived silence. I invited Vega to be co-founder, and he agreed without hesitation. We visited nursing homes, spoke with elderly people no one came to see. They told stories of houses stolen, of ungrateful children, of hugs that existed only in dreams. Each story reminded me of myself, but this time, it didn't hurt. I listened with a heart that had been stitched back together steady and whole. One afternoon, I returned to the old beach, the place where Raphael used to run as a child. The waves were gentle, the sky clear, the breeze carrying salt and memory. I sat on a wooden bench and opened a small notebook. Inside were the final lines I had written for myself. I died once. That death wasn't chosen by God, but by the one I gave life to. Yet he returned my breath not so I could live for others, but so I could learn to live for myself. I wrote one last line, slow and firm. I forgive the past, but I do not forget. I choose to live, because I have already tasted death. The sun slowly set, golden light spreading across the sea like a thin silk veil. I took a deep breath, listening to my heartbeat, no longer weak, no longer in pain, but peaceful, steady. In the distance, children played on the sand. Their laughter rang out like a bell marking the end of a tragedy. I smiled faintly. No ghosts chased me anymore. I closed the notebook and laid it on my lap. The wind flipped the last page, the slanted handwriting glowing under the sun. The second life for those chosen to return from death. Silence is not weakness sometimes, it is the strongest way to survive and reclaim justice. Isabella's story reminds us that family ties are no excuse for forgiving evil, and blind love can become a noose if we aren't awake. When pushed to the edge between life and death, a person can find within that pain a new kind of strength to rise, to confront, and to choose to live for themselves, and no one else.